If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
My guest now is author Guy Needler. From a young age, Guy has been aware of a greater reality and spiritual beings. But it wasn't until his spiritual reawakening in his late 30s that he devoted his work to spiritualism. Since then, he has gained his Reiki Masters and has trained in energy vibrations and therapy techniques. He is also the author of The History of God, which was re-released early this year. It focuses on the subject of spiritual physics and who and what God is. Guy Needler, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Kevin.
Now, Guy, we're going to be discussing your book, The History of God, which is a fascinating book, by the way. But firstly, you wasn't always very spiritual, was you?
No, I mean, I spent about 20 years where I had a gap from between becoming very spiritual and being told by my guides that I needed to get more earthly work done. And in those 20 years, I did what everybody else does, which is go to work, become sort of middle management, buy cars and houses and do academic work and getting 2 master's degrees and becoming a chartered engineer. And it wasn't until after that and a chance talk with a friend of mine who was also into Reiki that re-kick-started my interest in the spiritual world.
So where did the interest for spiritualism come from?
I believe that, in fact I don't believe anymore, I know that I came to this earth, as you know, to reincarnate in this body, and to get the information to be able to explain the worlds and the concepts surrounding spirit as part of my role in life, as part of my role in physical life. And within that we have a level of subconscious programming, if you want to call it that, where we inherently know what we've got to do. I mean, I've always known that I had something significant to do other than just the standard everyday working life and married life. I mean, a good example of that was when Robert Powell first did the Jesus of Nazareth series over a number of 8 weeks. I could just see myself being there 2,000 years ago and being part of that, what was going on around Jesus. And even with the Buddha, you know, and Muhammad, being part of those types of very important but very sort of localized events that were going to change the way mankind perceived his environment and considered his position within the earth and ultimately within the universe.
So you're in your mid-30s, were you, when you went through this sort of massive spiritual transformation?
Around about 39, this friend of mine who was interested in Reiki introduced me to a Reiki Master who basically kick-started my spiritual interest, if you want to call it that, again. And I very quickly became a Reiki Master within 18 months, and it all seemed very easy to me. But I also started to experience different energies and different understandings as well as what was being taught within Reiki. And that friend of mine subsequently left to go to Sweden to work in Sweden for a company over there. And then within his first year, my wife and I decided to go for basically a cheap holiday and stay with him. But what I didn't know at that time is he'd received information from the spirit that he needed to take me to a certain place south of the little village he used to live in, which is called Trollhättan, which is just, I think it's south of Gothenburg, where I would receive an attunement. So we went on a daily walk, we went to walk along this river, and we felt energies rising to a level that I'd never felt before during some of the healing techniques with Reiki. And it was within this area that I received a significant attunement by entities that I can only classify as being extraterrestrial or higher spiritual entities that we wouldn't classify as being native to the planet Earth. And from that day onwards, I started to become more and more adept at accessing different energies, perceiving different things, and working with what I can only describe as being spiritual physics.
The information that was coming across, was it a feeling that it was true that the information was, or I mean, how did it work for you?
Well, there's certain cues that one gets when you're receiving inspirational information, and it can be something as simple as walking into a shop, buying a packet of fish and chips, and instinctively knowing what the cost was without even looking at the menu board and looking at the price and adding it up yourself. Understanding straight away that it was going to cost £3.25 for instance, but not understanding the maths that go behind that is part of the information that you get that's, if you like, a milestone which tells one that the information they're picking up is real, because then when you get the bill and it comes and it actually is £3.25, for instance, that tells you you're picking up the information from somewhere else. But it also felt right. And when I log into the entities that I speak to and I receive images and I receive through clairvoyance and I receive images through audio-based information within my sort of head, if you want to call it that, through clairaudience, it's got a different personality to it. It says things in ways that I would never use. Sometimes it says it in an accent that I would never use. And it's just completely different to my own personality as a physical being on the planet. So from that perspective, that's how I tell that.
And basically,
else.
You've had to just go with it, haven't you? I suppose you've had to accept it, that this is your truth. This is, what you accept your path is going to be. So you go with it, regardless of what anyone else thinks.
Yes, and sometimes I now understand who to talk to and who not to talk to, because I can pick up their sort of base resonant frequency in terms of where they are evolutionary-wise, and I can instantaneously tell, that person will be okay to talk to or expand their knowledge, or they can help expand my knowledge, because I simply don't know everything. I just know chunks of bits and pieces, and those chunks of bits and pieces are what I've journaled and wrote down and created this book, The History of God, with.
Absolutely. And so you do a lot of work in the sort of, and you explain a lot in the book about the different frequencies as well. So just very briefly, just go over your work and how you've explained these different frequencies, and what do we mean by frequencies as well?
Well, frequencies are, from a physics perspective, what we know and understand as radio waves and the resonant frequency of molecules around us. So it's pretty standard physics from that perspective. But if I go to one of the entities I've been in communication with and its creator, when its creator, which is pure energy, became self-aware and sentient and became aware of its ability to learn, it decided to try and experience more of itself and understand more of itself. And in doing that, it learns and evolves as a process of that. And it tried to accelerate that by creating 12 more entities. Okay, and those entities, one of them, which is classified as our God, what I call the source entity in the book, created a multiverse. And that multiverse is structured in a quite basic sort of way. It has 12 dimensions, which are full dimensions. And each of those dimensions is, if you like, created of 3 sub-dimensions, a tritave. At the lowest dimensional position, we call it height, width, and length, for instance. And at this basic level, those 3-dimensional components create one full dimension. And above that, they start to multiply themselves. But each of those dimensional components are inflated by frequency bands, 12 frequency bands. And one of those frequency bands, from our perspective, would equal all of the frequencies that we are able to perceive with our own senses or measure with our own instruments, such as radio waves, digital radio waves in the gigahertz range, all of these microwaves, all of these different things that we use now for television, for radio, they're all part of the first band. And after that, we start to go into the more spiritual realms, or realms that we don't classify as being the physical world.
Right, so what you're saying there as well, if I understand it correctly, is that these other ranges are there for us to find, but we just don't have the technology yet to be able to perceive them, basically.
Yes, but we are developing technology that's actually, quite by accident, is starting to perceive some of these higher frequency entities or some of the permutations that occur within these higher frequencies. Within the healing world, it's understood that the human body has got 7 auric layers. I mean, there's more than that, and if we get a chance, we'll go through that.
Yeah.
But the first of those auric levels, the etheric, is the basic template that exists within which the body is filled and created. That is at the top end of that first frequency. So as we move into our physical frequency, we start to get higher and higher and higher up the microwaves into gigahertz range and beyond. We start to go into the etheric level, which is the first layer of the auric levels, the auric layer. So we've got the start point there. And we've started to get technology that picks these things up now, picks up manifestations of that first level. And the couple charge devices, the CCD arrays that we see in digital cameras, are starting to pick up phenomena that people are calling orbs or angels or various different ways of explaining it, because they're above and beyond the visible range.
But getting back to what you would call, you mentioned something you'd call the source. So when you mention the source, are you talking about the word we use as God?
That's right, yes. The source entity is the source of everything. And actually the source entity created a multiverse to be able to help the origin, the absolute, all that is, the source entity's creator, to help it accelerate its own evolutionary processes. And then it filled that multiverse with lots of different energetic entities which were split off from itself.
But why would it do that? I mean, what did it need to know? If it is all is, and it is all there is out there, why would it need to have it?
Because it doesn't know itself, basically.
It's got nothing to do on a Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it clearly doesn't understand itself fully yet. One of the things I've discovered in another meditation, which is part of a third book, which I'm currently writing, which is part 2 of Beyond the Source, which comes after this book, which is currently being reviewed for publication. I've established that the origin, that is the creator of our source entity, and other source entities that have their own multiverses and their own entities that populate those multiverses, has only really understood a fraction of 1% of its own volume, if you want to call it that. So it needs to, its desire to understand itself has created a level of evolution, and it wants to evolve, it wants to accelerate that. So these source entities were created to accelerate the origins evolutionary process. And in doing that, they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do to allow that evolutionary process to accelerate. So in our instance, our source entity, our God, if you want to put a title to that entity, made this multiverse, which has got 12 dimensions, constructed of 3 dimensional components or triotaves, which is inflated by 12 frequencies, creating 430. For mathematicians there, it's 432, but the first 3 create at one basic level, which is where we are now, basically. Different permutations of space or simultaneous universes for those energetic entities to exist within.
Okay, well, we'll come back to this whole multiverse theory just after the break, and also, well, there's so much we're going to talk about as well, and especially the RNA, the DNA. We've got loads to get into. So stay tuned, as we'll be right back after the break.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
Welcome back. I'm still joined with Guy Needler, author of The History of God. Now, Guy, just before the break there, I really wanted to ask you the question of your guides. I mean, why have you been allowed to sort of, not allowed is the right word, but why have you had this kind of channeling? Why can't we all just, receive the information that you've got, have come to you and is still coming to you now?
I think there's two reasons for that. The first reason is what we choose to do before we become incarnate, before we start to project some part of ourselves, because there's only a small part of our larger energetic self that comes into the physical. And we come with a plan, basically, which is, to be honest, retained in a subconscious manner, that we have a link into that tells us that sometimes some people have to be a doctor, some people have to be a scientist, some people need to be somebody who is a housewife, for instance. And it's these experiences that we come to Earth with to experience are part of our evolution, because we experience, we learn from those experiences, and we evolve as a result of that experience. So, from my perspective, I've come down to take on board information that allows me to present the information that I'm receiving from Spirit in a way that mankind can understand by everyday terminology, everyday understandings.
But do you think you're ahead of your time?
I have to say that when I was 8, and this is an interesting thing to talk about, I remember sitting in the classroom and my teacher saying, Apollo 8 has just gone around the moon. And I thought, the moon, is that all? So I think that statement might be probably correct. But actually, when I understand where the Earth is now and how fast the Earth has progressed in terms of its technology, which, by the way, is a milestone or a waypoint that shows us that we're becoming more aware of concepts that come through from the higher energetic realms, I see that actually this was probably the right time, and this is the right time to get this level of information out there.
The book's called The History of God. So have you managed to sort of channel to the actual source itself, God?
Yes, and in fact, when I first started to do this as part of my energetic and vibrational healing training, where we learned to be able to move up and down the frequencies to affect healing on the different auric levels and the chakras, which are energy centers and meridians that people use in acupuncture, those sort of things. I managed to move up and down these frequencies and further. And moving beyond those known frequencies, which is through a technique that I was using, and then expanding that technique as part of the training, I then managed to go well above those frequencies and be in contact with this entity that we call source entity.
And what did the source have to sort of communicate to you with? I mean, what was the main message?
The main message is that we're all part of it, basically. There's lots of information within the book, and there's lots of information in the other texts that I'm creating or channeling the information. And that link is there all the time now. I don't need to go through what I classify as mechanical means or heavy meditational means to get there anymore, because I'm in contact.
But you still have to go through the guides to get to contact with the source? No, you're in direct contact.
Straight there right now.
Okay.
And the whole point of us being here is that we are, and we need to recognise this, we are parts of that source entity. We are individualised pieces of that energy that have been created to allow experience and evolution and learning at a very basic level.
Would you say we are gods then?
We are part of God. Yeah, we are part of God.
Are we God's godding?
We are God. We're not gods in our own right. We are God. We are individualised parts of God. So if you want to put us as smaller gods, then
with a lowercase g.
Yeah.
What does God want from us?
Wants us to evolve. Because in the evolutionary process, by experiencing things at a very base level, and on the physical universe, we experience the physical dimension in its most basic level through having to experience things, in the physical whilst being in the physical. We experience different things that we've set ourselves up to experience, and we learn different things. We do things right, we do things wrong, although there is no right and wrong, there's just experience. And as a result of that, we evolve. And we pass that evolutionary content onto, we don't lose it ourselves, by the way, we pass it on to the source entity. And in turn, that source entity passes it on to the origin, so that it's able to experience, learn and evolve what we've experienced, and then take that on board and evolve in its own right.
But if it's all-knowing, and there's nothing more you can teach this source, why have experience then? Is it to feel the experience? Is there a difference between knowing and feeling?
Well, quite clearly from the work I've done, even the origin isn't all-knowing. It is all-knowing within a certain part of itself. A number of months ago, I picked up an image of the origin being spherical, if you want to call it that, and then that part of itself that it understood being a fraction of 1% of its total volume. And it wants to experience more. But in that fraction of 1%, it's created these source entities who have created multiverses and universes and entities. And they're all there to experience the minute detail of that which is ultimately the origin, but within the compartmentalised sections of the different source entities what they're created.
But my question is as well, is it wanting to, have the experience of the feeling, because all it knows is the knowing from what I'm sort of understanding from you?
Absolutely right. And the physical is the hardest place to experience feeling. If you think about us as being the lowest frequencies within the lowest dimension there is within our source entities multiverse, we're in the first universe, if you want to call it that. We are in a position where we can experience things in total isolation to having greater knowledge of cosmic consciousness, if you want to call it that.
So my experience on planet Earth is different to your experience.
Absolutely.
And the feelings experience is a whole different dimension to that as well. You're going to go through different variations of pain to what I am. So is this what it's looking at as? I mean, so when we're on this level, the separation's there. But when it's going back to this totality of this oneness that you talk about, then our experience becomes the experience of the total.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yes. There's something called the Akashic Records, which I use to record all of the experiences that energetic mankind has experienced, both in the energetic and in the physical. And that's all part of what's experienced and passed on to the source entity.
Does it want to call itself God? I mean, we're not talking about a he or she here, are we? It's all of us. Is it a name we've adapted for it? Is it a man-made name, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically, God is a word that we've used to explain something that we can't explain. Anything that has got more knowledge than ourselves, or is more able to do things than ourselves, is classified as God. If we go back into the times when we were just discovering America, things like the Aztecs and the Toltecs, they perceived the Spanish when they came on board as being gods, because they clearly were gods, because they got low-level technology such as muskets, which the Aztecs and Toltecs hadn't got. They got ships that could go across the oceans, which the Aztecs and Toltecs hadn't got. And all these things, all these different things, showed a level of technology and understanding and knowing which was beyond their own capabilities themselves. So they classified them as gods.
So what about the atheists and all this? Where does God, or this totality, why come into this incarnation to be an atheist then? I mean, are you switched off and feeling that there's more than this? Is that a conscious decision as well?
Sometimes it's a conscious decision on the behalf of that which is us in the energetic, to experience total isolation in every way, shape and form. And that's in terms of our experiences, how we relate to those experiences, and a belief system that would give us something to grab onto as being that there is something else other than the physical existence.
But to them, they wouldn't feel that way. To them, this would just be not their truth, a load of rubbish.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's what an entity wants to exist and wants to experience. And that's all part of the greater tapestry, as it were, of experience and what we're, as energetic entities created by the source entity, have signed up for to pass on.
But we're all looking for answers, and you must meet all sorts of people, especially those rather confused with any type of religion, and that no matter what your views are, will still attack you for them as such.
And those people I have to love and let them carry on with where they are until such a time where they're able to take on board certain parts of the information. I've learnt over the years that there are people who are within their own evolutionary base or within their own existence base, and they're not ready, or they've decided not to be able to take on board some of the information that myself and other spiritual people or teachers or gurus, senses, whichever way you want to describe them, are saying is reality.
So I mean, how do you know though that the messages you're getting through are from a source which is telling the truth?
Actually, in reality, I don't. If I was to say, I've got no physical evidence that suggests that what I'm experiencing, what I'm channeling, what I'm receiving as information from spirit has got any substance whatsoever.
Or truth.
Or truth in that fact, except from collaborative evidence from other individuals who are doing similar things in total isolation to myself, and they're saying the same thing in different ways. And that is what tells me that I'm not going mad, basically. I'm not talking to myself, I'm not going psychotic.
What last message would the source like to give right now, if it could give a message right now, if it can give a message?
There's only one real message that the source would say that I should give, and that is that because we're all parts of the source entity, we're all parts of God, we are all God, then why would we treat each other the way we do? Why wouldn't we treat each other with compassion and love and help and wisdom, rather than being deliberately nasty to each other?
And why don't we, just very quickly?
Because sometimes it's those things that we need to experience as part of our life plan.
So what is wrong and right is down to our experience.
There is no wrong and right. There is just experience, and how we accept that experience, and whether we feel comfortable with it or not comfortable with it, whether we accept it as being an opportunity for evolutionary advancement, or whether we don't accept it as that. And that's where we are.
Well, Guy Needler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show, Kevin.
Stay tuned as we'll be right back after the break.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.